Is this a joke? You expect to make a deposit with this old thing?
The lobby of the bank shimmered with the usual morning bustle. Golden sunlight filtered through tall glass windows, painting streaks across the polished floor where business shoes clicked in rhythm. Men in pressed suits scrolled through their phones. Women with folders clutched tightly to their chests whispered about meetings. And every ticking second from the large wall clock reminded the crowd of the value of time. Everyone in that room looked as though they belonged to the world of marble floors and shiny counters. Everyone, except one man. He stepped through the revolving door slowly, his worn-out boots echoing louder than they should have in such a refined place. His clothes were simple, faded from years of labor under the sun. A straw hat rested in his hand, his shoulders slightly bent but steady. In his grasp was an old leather wallet, cracked at the edges, carried like it held the weight of his entire life. His name was Mr. Rowan, and though most people in that lobby didn't know it yet, he was about to change everything they believed about wealth, dignity, and respect. As he made his way to the line, heads turned. Some glanced at him once and dismissed him with a sigh of impatience. Others looked twice, their eyes carrying a mix of judgment and curiosity. To them, he was clearly a man out of place, a relic of hard work and weathered days among polished marble and expensive ties. Mr. Rowan lowered his gaze, not because he was ashamed, but because he had walked through enough rooms like this to know exactly what kind of stares he would receive. For decades, he had lived with quiet dignity. He never flaunted his achievements, never cared for the glitter of public approval. And because of that, people assumed he had nothing. That morning, all he wanted was something simple, to check his account balance, to make sure the work of a lifetime still sat safely where he had left it. He had no idea that before he left, the entire bank would fall silent around him. From inside his glass office, the branch manager spotted him. Victor Kane was the kind of man who loved the stage more than the work behind it. Sharp suit, perfectly styled hair, and a smirk that told the world he believed himself better than most. Victor thrived on appearances, and nothing amused him more than humiliating those he saw as beneath him. When his eyes landed on Mr. Rowan, his lips curved into a laugh before the man had even reached the counter. Victor nudged a young teller beside him and whispered something that made the clerk chuckle. Then, with a voice loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, he called out, "If you even have a balance, old man, I'll pay you double!" The words sliced through the air like glass. Conversations halted. Phones lowered. Customers turned in unison, their expressions ranging from shock to amusement. The old man froze, gripping his wallet tighter, his shoulders stooping just a little more under the weight of mockery. But his eyes, those steady, tired eyes, remained calm. He had endured enough of life's scorn to know that silence sometimes carried more power than 1,000 words. The room waited for him to respond, but he said nothing. Instead, he moved forward, step by step, until he reached the teller's counter. The clerk, still smirking, asked for his ID. "Mr." Rowan handed it over without a word, his weathered hand steady despite the cruel laughter still echoing across the room. As the clerk began typing, his smirk gradually faltered. His eyes narrowed at the screen, then widened. He leaned closer, blinking twice as though the numbers in front of him were a trick of the light. His fingers trembled on the keyboard. And then, the color drained from his face. The lobby grew tense. Victor, sensing something was off, strutted forward, laughter still bubbling in his throat. "Come on, don't tell me he actually has something in there," he sneered. But the moment the paper printed, Victor's hand shot out, snatching it from the clerk. His laugh died mid-breath. The slip of paper shook in his grip, the balance written in bold digits staring back at him. Zeros, more than he had ever seen in a personal account. Stretched across the page, numbers that could buy the entire building several times over. His arrogance drained away like mist under the sun. The room was silent now. Customers leaned in, eyes wide. Staff exchanged uneasy glances. And in the center of it all, Mr. Rowan simply waited, his wallet ready to hold the slip that carried proof not of his wealth, but of something greater. Victor's hand trembled as the paper fluttered between his fingers. The confidence he wore, like armor, cracked, his polished smile replaced by a pale stiffness. Around him, the silence pressed down like a storm. Every gaze in that lobby, once admiring of his swagger, now turned sharp with judgment. The same customers who once laughed at his jokes leaned forward, waiting for the truth to land. Mr. Rowan reached out calmly, taking the slip of paper and folding it with deliberate care. He slid it into his wallet, his movements unhurried, his composure unshaken. Then, at last, he lifted his eyes to meet Victor's. His voice, when it came, wasn't loud, yet it carried with the weight a man who had nothing to prove. "The real balance we carry," he said evenly, "isn't in numbers or accounts. It's in how we treat others." The words echoed through the lobby. They landed heavier than any reprimand, sharper than any insult. For a moment, it seemed even the ticking clock had paused to listen. Victor's throat tightened. Shame rushed through him, burning hotter than anger ever could. He looked around and saw his staff watching him differently now. Customers who once envied his confidence now stared with open contempt. His kingdom of pride, built on mockery and pretense, crumbled in a single sentence. But Mr. Rowan wasn't finished. He turned slightly, addressing not just Victor, but the entire room. His voice softened, carrying warmth now, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I grew up with nothing," he began. "Every dollar I earned came through sweat, sacrifice, and patience. I built this bank, brick by brick, not to create arrogance, but to give families hope, to help workers achieve their dreams, to remind us all that respect must always come before wealth." Gasps rippled through the lobby. The old man in the faded shirt, the one mocked for being out of place, was no ordinary customer. He was the very founder of the institution, the silent hand behind its walls of glass and marble. Murmurs rose. A young mother in line wiped at her eyes. An older gentleman pressed his hand against his chest, nodding slowly as though he had been waiting years to hear such truth spoken aloud. Even the clerks behind the counter shifted uncomfortably, their earlier laughter dissolving into regret. Victor, though, stood frozen. His mind raced, but there was no excuse, no recovery. The humiliation was complete. Pride and shame wrestled inside him until he felt smaller than he ever had before. Mr. Rowan adjusted his wallet back into his pocket and turned toward the exit. His slow steps echoed in the silence, each one striking harder than any rebuke. The man who looked worn and ordinary now carried the presence of a giant, leaving a trail of truth too heavy for anyone to ignore. By afternoon, whispers of the encounter spread like wildfire. By evening, the story had reached the highest floors of the corporate tower. And within days, Victor Kane was summoned before the board. At the head of the table sat Mr. Rowan, this time not in his straw hat, but in a simple suit that carried the same humility. His gaze met Victor's. Not angry, but deeply disappointed. "Leadership," Mr. Rowan said, "isn't measured by how loudly you speak, but by how kindly you treat the smallest voice in the room." Victor resigned soon after. The shame was too great, the respect he once demanded forever lost. For the staff, though, the lesson endured. They began to see their work not as transactions, but as opportunities to serve with dignity. Customers entered the bank with a new sense of respect, reminded of the story of the man in the faded shirt, the man who had built an empire not for glory, but for kindness. And Mr. Rowan. He returned to the life he had always chosen. simple, quiet, free from grandeur. To him, true wealth was never measured in digits. It was measured in dignity. In the years that followed, the story was retold countless times, not just as a tale of a CEO in disguise, but as a timeless reminder that appearances deceive, but character never does. Somewhere in a sunlit lobby filled with strangers, an old man had reminded the world that the greatest balance is carried not in banks, but in hearts. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who needs a reminder of what true wealth really means. And remember, kindness is the only currency that never loses its value.